Hey everybody, how's everybody doing today? Welcome to the Thursday live stream where we talk about photography and catch up on what's new and what's been happening. Wow, yeah, this week, well, not just this week, but this year so far, we've had a lot of cameras released, a lot of new lenses across all formats, I believe. Micro Four Thirds, we had GH6 and the OM1, and in the APS-C, we recently had the Canon R7, R10, and now and then full frame. I'm trying to think. I don't follow full frame quite as much, but I'm sure. I think the R3 might be new, but and the Z9. Oh my goodness, yeah, some big ones, heavy hitters there, right? And then of course I saw a lot of videos this morning on a Sigma 16 to 28 f2.8 and anyway, a bunch of other lenses. You know, like I said, I don't watch a lot of lens reviews because I was looking at all the lenses I have, and it just I pretty much got it covered. You know, and unless I need something specifically, uh, if I specifically need a higher end glass, like I bought that 300 f4 Pro, I don't see a need for anything right now. I was let me show you. I need to get these off. But I was watching while I was watching my videos, the usual stuff. I've been watching a lot of reaction, not reaction, but scare cam videos. My God, they're hilarious. But anyway, yeah. So I made a list of God everything I have, and I'm trying to think, uh, what the heck else could I need? I mean, on the primes, these are all f1.8s. On the Micro Four Thirds, I got the 8, the 17, the 25, the 45, the 75, right? And then on the zooms, I got a 12 to 40 Pro. The kit lenses, I got 3 of those in different versions. And the 40 to 150 kit, the 300 f4 Pro, the 7 to 14 f4, and then one adapted lens I like to use time to time, a 35 f1.7 CCTV lens, which is kind of a fun lens. And then my Nikon glass, actually, I was surprised. I didn't have that much. I guess I sold a lot of it to pay for my Micro Four Thirds stuff. But I still got my 35 millimeter Zeiss, the 35 millimeter 2.0 D lens, the 50 millimeter D, the 60 millimeter micro, Nikon likes to call it, but it's a macro lens. And then the 2 kit lenses, the 1855 and an 18 to 105. And then I have some vintage Nikons, the 135, the 105, and the 200. All wonderful glass. And then on the OM side, OM vintage glass, I have the 50, the 24, and a zoom, a 35 to 100. So that's just so many lenses. And that's not counting the dozen or so lenses I sold off to help pay for the ones I have now. Nor does it count a bunch of junk lenses that I never use. I got like a 50 millimeter CCTV. I've got, but I've been shooting for 10 years now, almost 10, maybe let's call it 9. Really, it's 9 years. And I started with the Sony NEX6. I still have that, the NEX6 and the kit lens that came with it. I sold off the 2 other lenses I bought for it at the time. And then I was in Nikon from basically 2014 to 2015, most of 2015. So really 2016 is when I started Micro Four Thirds, and that's where I've stayed for all this time, the last 6 years. And camera body wise, oh my goodness. Without naming them all, I have 4 or 5 Micro Four Third cameras, 2 full frames, 3 APS-Cs. I forgot about the Canon. And well, there's 2 more APS-Cs there I never used. Those are old Nikon D80s and a D40. And then super small sensor stuff. You know, I got bridge cameras. I got the TG5, the Fuji, you know, stuff that I've kept, Fujis and Canons that I've kept since before I got serious about photography. And then film cameras. I mean, I have 2 or 3 that are, well, 3 that I really like. I like my Pen F half frame, you know, vintage half frame camera. It's a Pen FT, not the original first Pen F. And I like my OM2 and OM2S. I have an OM2 and an OM2S. Both are really nice, and an OM1 actually. Not sure if that, I think that one works. I haven't taken it out in a long time. And then a couple of Nikon film cameras, an FM and a 9000 and an N75 and a and of course, and then a couple of Minoltas, right? The SRT 101, which was my dad's, so I inherited that, and an XG2, I think it is, which is which I inherited from my uncle when he passed. So there's lots of vintage Minolta glass there as well. That, well, not a lot. I have a 50 1.4. That's an excellent lens, and a 135 f3.5. Awesome. I really like the Minolta vintage glass because it's relatively compact, and you know, pretty good quality. Not super, right? You have to kind of cherry pick the Minolta glass to find really good ones. But there are some really excellent lenses out there for super cheap if you want to adapt vintage glass or just shoot film. And then of course the Hasselblad, right? The 500C that I have. It's not even it's the 500C, I think. And that's just a beautiful camera. That was a pure spur of the moment purchase because I got a really good deal on it. And it was just so beautiful sitting there in the cabinet when I saw it. I said, I gotta have it. And honestly, I thought that would be the last camera I buy for a long time. And that was back in December, I think. But I ended up getting the OM1. And speaking of OM systems, there's a rumor out about an OM5 coming out, and we'll see what that turns out to be. I think the rumor site said something that it's not going to be an EM5 III replacement. So I don't know what that means. But if it's just what they should do, what I'd like to see is a very entry-level camera. I think that's, super enthusiast friendly. So what do I mean by that? I think the EM10, after the Mark II, the Mark IIIs and the 4, they really limited a lot of the features on them that enthusiasts would really like to have, and keeps them from being pro-level cameras. Feature-wise, weather sealing kind of knocks it out of the park anyway. But that aside, I never bought the Mark III or the Mark IV because it didn't have custom settings. It didn't have silent shutter mode, unless you're using the AP mode, which is full auto. And some other minor niggles that you don't, that wouldn't be deal breakers to me. But not having custom modes is what keeps it for me from being a professional, me being able to use it professionally. And I'm sure there's other things in there that I'm missing, but that was the main deal breaker for me, was I gotta have a custom mode dial. And the EM5 Mark III only has one setting on the mode dial, and I wish they would do a firmware update so that we can program other parts of the mode dial to be custom modes like we can on just about any other Olympus camera. But some reason they didn't put it on there. But as it is, it works well as a backup camera for me now because it's very small to put in the bag, doesn't take up any space, and if for whatever reason I drop or break or forget to charge the battery, whatever, if my OM1 is down, I can pull out the EM5 Mark III, and for my paid work, the EM5 Mark III, I mean the EM10 Mark II for that matter, will do 100% of what I need for what I do professionally. And the OM1 is really just although I use it professionally now, I used it on my first paid job last week, or gosh, it could be 2 weeks ago now. But anyway, I finally used it professionally for a couple of jobs now, but it's not necessary. It's overkill for what I do because I'm just on a tripod using flash, and then most of the work that I do that's paid work is all done in post-processing. Long as the camera can capture and have a workflow that is conducive to what I do, meaning it has the custom modes. I heavily depend on the custom modes for my workflow because I have to switch from an ambient light situation to flash, using flash in every single scene that I go through in a building or a house. I don't like to do residential, but commercial properties, every room I go to, those are the two things I do. And then I need a third custom mode for outdoor, getting the outdoor shots, right? So I'm constantly switching between C1, C2, and then C3. C3 is usually the last thing I do. It depends on the light. If the lighting is good when I get there, I start with C3, the ambient light outdoors. If the light is good, not good, I'll go in and shoot and then come back out and hopefully within the hour, because usually it takes me about an hour, maybe an hour and a half if they want me to do video to complete a job. And hopefully the lighting's improved from when I started, then I go to C3. But that's what I did. But like I said, the EM10 Mark II did that for me, and I used the EM10 Mark II professionally when I started. Not when I started professionally, but that was the camera I started with in Micro Four Thirds to do my real estate commercial photography. And I if I didn't bust the battery door and the dials are getting a little finicky. Like if I put it on A mode, it may not go to A mode. It'll be stuck in P mode for whatever reason. And if I jiggle it, it works. So it's got a lot of wear and tear on it. And I keep pointing at you because I'm using it right now. It's just a dedicated webcam now for my live streams. So time to time, it'll just phase out of focus, right? You might notice that because it's the old contrast detect. But I think it works really well for the most part, right? It's only when I do things like this and then or move in and out too fast, it takes a little while to catch up. But it works perfectly fine for streaming because this is not critical critical content, right? It's just a live stream. Anywho, but yeah, the OM5, I haven't checked the rumor site since they first announced it, I guess a week ago. But I'd like to see like a non-weather sealed. If it's not an EM5 Mark III replacement, it's not going to be weather sealed. So that's the first prediction. But it needs to do everything the OM1 does, except for maybe the higher end video and shutter speed stuff, right? So it probably won't have 420 10-bit internal recording, but it should have 4K 60 at the very least. And it needs to have the pro capture. It needs to have everything the OM1 does. If it's going to have pro capture, it doesn't need to be as fast as the OM1. But I'm just wondering if they're really going to put everything the OM1 has into it, can they bring the price down to under $1,000? You know, because OM1 is what, $2,200, and that's no joke, right? It needs to be 1,000 or less, but still have probably 90% of what the OM1 can do. Now that's definitely going to cannibalize sales off the OM1 if they do that. But is that a bad thing, right? Why not? I mean, the OM1 may be more profitable for them than, say, $1,000 camera would be. So I don't know from a business standpoint where they have to make that nexus between price and performance. But when you look at, say, the Canon R7, right? Or is it the R10? Whichever one is the cheaper one. That's $1,000. That's a pretty capable camera, albeit with an older sensor tech. But overall, it's a very capable camera with the same autofocusing system as the R3, their top-end camera. So Canon definitely, I think, has done a really good job with their whatever the cheaper one was. I forget which one it is. I think they did a really good job with that camera. They gave it really everything that an enthusiast would be looking for at a lower price point. And that's what the EM10 Mark II was when it came out. It gave everything an enthusiast would look for at a much lower price point. And that's what the OM5 needs to be. You know, right around that $1,000 price point, but offer everything, even if it's not top tier, right? It doesn't have to be 50 frames per second. 20 is fine, right? Less than half that would be fine. But it needs to have awesome autofocus, right? The subject detect. And the same sensor performance, so put the same sensor in there if you can. If you cannot, because even the R10, R7 doesn't have their, top of the line sensor tech in it, right? It's still a standard CMOS sensor. It's not BSI. It's not stacked. So what does that mean? Put the old 20 megapixel sensor in there from the M1 Mark III, then it's not going to have the good autofocus that the OM1 does, and that's a problem. Unless they refabricate the lenses and the autofocusing system on the sensor, if they can do that separately, technically it would be a new chip. It just wouldn't have BSI or stacking, right? And the performance of the M1 Mark III for general photography is just as good as the OM1. You're not going to see a marked improvement in image quality for general stuff. When you start pushing the limits of the camera, the OM1 is going to outperform the M1 Mark III. By at least a stop, maybe 2 stops if you really. I think that's stretching it a bit, but at least a stop, better improvement on the extremes, right? When you're doing extremes, but general stuff, if you're not trying to push and pull 2-3 stops out of your scene, and with the use of a desktop, software, there's virtually no difference between EM1.3 and OM1 and for general photography. So I hope that that's what the OM5 will be, is something like what Canon did. Offer just about everything an enthusiast would want, maybe at a lower tier, but the functionality needs to be there. Handheld high-res shot mode, right? Focus stacking in camera, all of that stuff needs to be in the camera, but it just needs to be not weather sealed, maybe, and not and maybe not premium build, right? Like it's a magnesium alloy on the OM1. They can just use a premium metal. It doesn't have to be a premium magnesium alloy like the OM1. And what would also be nice, oh my God, you know what would be so nice is if it uses the same effing battery as the OM1. That would be awesome. So that would mean it would need to have a grip as well. But that would make it, people buying who have bought the OM1, that would be an awesome backup camera to the OM1 for professionals. For your average enthusiast, you know, they just want the $1,000 price point. For the professional, functionality over form is more important, right? we need to have the same batteries, you know, across our cameras. It just makes things a lot easier. And then the same functionality, but maybe at a slightly limited capacity, which would be okay as a backup camera. You know, real pros, they buy two of the same. They buy two OM1s, right? But for pros like me that, you know, starving artist type thing, where you only see a job every now and then, it's like, you know, as a backup camera, you know, like I said, my EM5 Mark III is my backup right now. Anywho, let me check who's in the stream. I haven't looked at the chat section yet. Hey, Plato, Rick, Roberto. Good to see everyone. Let's see what the comments are. Seraphin, Druid, good to see you. Annette, good to see you. Let's see. Hello, hello. Oh, Seraphin wants a replacement for the M5 Mark III. I think that will come, but I don't know if the OM5 is going to be it. Is my guess. I mean, maybe it will be an EM, but the rumor specifically stated that it's not an EM5 Mark III replacement. So my guess is it's going to be an EM10 replacement. Is my guess. Hopefully, it's in the spirit of the Mark II series, where it had everything. You know, had everything. What would they call an EM5 Mark III replacement? Maybe an OM7. Just take on a whole new naming nomenclature, right? Naming convention, I should say. So there'd be the 5, the 7, and the 1. That would be interesting. Because the OM7 could then be that should be at about a $1,500 price point, maybe $1,700. But it needs to be about $500 difference between, you know, there needs to be $500 gaps between three cameras. So 1,000, 1,500, and 2,200, or 1,000, 1,600, and 20, you know, something like that. So at $1,600, you would get basically the OM5, but with weather sealing, better build quality, and maybe some additional functionality, right, over the OM5. And at that point, now we're talking about a camera that would definitely cannibalize OM1 sales. Because a key distinction between a lot of professional cameras is the weather sealing, right? So I don't know if they could put something in between the two at $1,700 or $1,600. What could they do? It'd be interesting to see if they come out with an OM7. I don't know. OM7. What would that be? Because if we have an OM5 that does almost everything, then you go to an OM7 and add weather sealing and a few other features. Because honestly, they would have to probably keep the BSI stack sensor in the OM1 exclusive to keep any other camera they make from cannibalizing the sales, because that's the big significant difference between all all their cameras now. Is the only one with a stacked BSI sensor. But it's $1,700. You know, you're talking about a lot of competition with stacked BSI sensors, right? In every format. So I don't know. And I'm not sure if it has IBIS. I believe it does. Honestly, I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. Does R10 have IBIS? Maybe someone in the chat room can look it up and let us know. Oh, crap. I lost my display. Hold on. Canon R10. Where's dual pixel? Oh, maybe not. Maybe it doesn't have IBIS. Shutter speed, exposure modes, recording interface, focus, flash. No IBIS. Wow. Yeah. There is no IBIS on that camera. So that's interesting. Okay, that explains partially some of the price point, right? I gotta figure out what's going on with my third display here, because this allows me to kind of just look down and talk to you guys. But now I gotta like crick my neck over to see the chat. And then speaking of autofocus, I'm surprised so many bird photographers use autofocus in preference to manual, as things like branches and extra processing for autofocus cause so many problems. Wow, I can't speak to that. You know, I think for birds that are just sitting on a branch, most of the time autofocus is okay. For if you can take the time to get the autofocus point within that spot. If the bird is moving, like flying behind trees and between branches, that's a little bit more random. Now I saw an awesome, it's a guy that goes to one of the local parks here, Quan, that he uses a Sony A1 with a 600 f4, that $20,000 setup. But man, he was able to track a bird, you know, flying through the trees, and that camera did not lose focus at all. You know, I don't know if that was like, you know, you get lucky sometimes that works, or if that's a consistent thing he can do. But the fact that I don't see too many shots like that tells me it's probably, you know, you get lucky sometimes and you can track a bird through the trees. But if I was seeing consistently shots from him that was like that all the time, I'd be like, man, that's freaking amazing. But the autofocus is pretty good. But I think it's partially, you know, a lot of people just don't know how to autofocus, and the feel for the autofocus, you know, this focus by wire thing is not, It's not as nice as a manual focus, right? Because there's no resistance on a focus by wire, so it just doesn't feel the same. I guess you get used to it, but I set up my camera to manually focus for shots like that, like when the birds are kind of behind branches. But a lot of times, if the bird's behind the branch, right, it's not going to be a very good shot anyway. Um, so I don't even bother now. If I see a bird and there's branches in front of it, even if I got the bird in focus, it's like there's a branch in front of it. It's not going to be very good shot anyway, at least for me. I'm sure there's great shots of birds behind branches that, you'll find, but I know if I took one, not being a hardcore bird photographer yet, it would suck. It would just suck, even if the bird was in focus. And oh, that reminds me, I did contact the local Air Force base uh, about visitor access and stuff, and it's locked down. You have to be sponsored by somebody in active military to get on, or to have any kind of access to anything. I can get on the base with my mom because she's dependent, because my dad was military, and I can go in with her, just show my ID. But once I'm on the base, the access is pretty restricted. Um, and like I'm not going to get anywhere near the runways or anywhere near the hangars. All I'd have access to is some of the residential areas that they have and the uh, general shopping, right? And other things on the base. So, in that respect, short term, I don't really have any good access to the base that would be photography worthy, right? Because I've been on the base, many times, but in the places I've been to, it's not very photogenic, right? The most interesting places are near the hangars and the runways. So what I have to do is network a little bit. I'm gonna have to find somebody active that's on active duty that works on the base, that works particularly in the hangar, right? Maybe they're a pilot even. So I have to do a little networking and see if I can get to know someone, maybe in our photo club, because there's a couple thousand members there, or maybe now that I'm conscious of it, put my feelers out and ask people, what do you do, where do you work, that kind of thing, and start networking. So maybe over time, I'll be able to get to know someone, because you know what they say, right? 6 degrees, right? Uh, you're connected to everybody in the world by six people. Is that the thing? 6 degrees, and so if I know someone, they know someone, they know someone. Eventually, you get to someone that knows somebody that can help you with what you want to accomplish. And at this point, I don't have that thing, so I need to start putting feelers out. I guarantee. I mean, this area is very government intensive. Most people that work in or a lot of people that work in the government here are retired military. So maybe their kids, right, are active duty and might know somebody. So like I said, I have to kind of put the feelers out to see, and then once you have access to the hangars, at least, right, you'll never get access to Air Force One because that's where the president flies out of. That's the main base. But you can get access to a lot of the hangars and helicopters and some of the other more not Air Force One type stuff. And so you'd still have access to see probably the F-16s that fly around. I don't hear them fly around too often, though. I heard one yesterday, a fighter jet, and I ran outside, as soon as I heard it, and it was already gone. And then that's the first jet I've heard, gosh, in months. I feel like helicopters all day long 24/7. I mean, it could be like midnight and my windows are rattling from the freaking helicopters flying over. But jets themselves, particularly fighter jets, right? Because they sound different. The fighter jets, they're loud. The cargo jets and stuff, they get up to altitude pretty quickly, and they're out, right? I don't really hear them too much. But the fighter jets, man, I don't know why, but when they take off, they're low, and they stay low until they get way out. But the cargo ones, a lot of times they're still propeller, some of them, just using props, right? And the jet ones I don't see too often, time to time, but it's pretty rare. I don't see a lot of activity at that base other than helicopters lately. All right. Opinions on Viltrox lenses compared to Olympus lenses. Looking at the Nikon ZFC with a 23 1.4. I'm not familiar with the Viltroxes. I think they are autofocus though, right? Let me look real quick. Viltrox 1.4. So that's the X mount, the Z mount, $299, and let's see what the specs are. So you have a 23 f1.4, 16 millimeter full frame lens, 0.1. Ooh, doesn't have a very good magnification. So if you want to do any close up, normally wide angle lenses, you can get pretty close. But that's pretty rough. 0.1x for a wide angle. 9 rounded aperture blades, so it should have a nice smooth creamy bokeh, right, in the background. And I'm not talking about the bokeh balls, like that's a little different type of bokeh, right? When you're going for the bokeh balls, because those can have all kinds of different characteristics, but the overall smoothness of the bokeh in the background should be smooth with 9 blades. Ooh, a nice standard Nikon filter mount, the 52 millimeters. So if you have any vintage Nikon glass, a lot of the filters you have will work with that. 300 grams, that's pretty hefty, but it is a full frame lens, so that makes sense. But nothing about 11 elements in 10 groups. That doesn't tell me much. Let's see. Let's see if there's any Mtf charts. There's an Mtf chart. I mean, this is all relative, right? So the 30 line pair is the blue line. And this is at, oh, why? They have an f1.4 and at f8. Let me pull this up. Something's not right. Which one is the f8? Must be the red lines. $30 line pair. Why is this black and white and then this is a stupid Mtf chart? But yeah, I like this, nice and flat. When I look at an Mtf chart, I like to see it above 0.6, and it's pretty flat all the way out to 12. And this is the distance. This is the diameter, right, of the image circle. So if you're talking about APS-C, APS-C diagonal size is what? That's the Canon. The Nikon is 28. All right. So I'm sorry, this is the radius, not the diameter. This is the radius of the image circle. So we're talking about 24 millimeters, right? All the way around. So most of the image is not going to have any issues wide open. It should be very, very sharp. And the Nikon ZF, let's see, Nikon ZFC specs is what? 20 megapixel. Pixel pitch is I don't know what the pixel pitch is. I don't know how much of that conversation you guys heard on that lens, the Viltrox lens. Let me go back out to the chat. Robin Vlogs. Is that Robin Wong? If so, how you doing? Well, either way, how you doing? I was trying to because that little thumbnail almost looks like Robin, but I can't tell. I can't tell from here. Robin Wong, that is. The one with the channel on YouTube here. But oh, it is Robin Wong. The happiest man on earth is here. That's awesome. So good to see you. So I was talking about that lens, that Viltrox 23 millimeter f1.4, and based off of the technical data that I could find between the Mtf charts and some other Imatest charts, because there's a difference. The Imatest is actually a third-party software that they use to take a picture of a chart and test the lens resolving ability. And just to sum it up, it looks like that lens will be able to resolve virtually every pixel on that camera, certainly at f2.8 or higher. Between f2.8 and f8, it should be able to resolve everything. Even at f1.4, it looks pretty sharp. There may be a slight softness, particularly at the edges, because the diameter of a APS-C sensor is 28 millimeters, and it looks like right at about 24 millimeters, the lens circle falls off quite a bit in terms of sharpness. So it's going to be very soft in the corners, wide open, a little soft even if you stop down. The bokeh should be very smooth because it has 9 rounded aperture blades, and it's using I didn't see anything special about the optical design, which is typically probably why the price point is $299. Because in the optical design, when I looked at it, it's 11 elements, 9 groups or whatever. It had your standard, ultra low, extra low dispersion glass, your high refractive glass. You need the ultra high refractive because it is a wide angle. 23 millimeters for full frame is pretty wide angle. But it didn't have any spherical glass. And I don't know what kind of coatings. They're all using anti-reflective coatings. So depending on how good the coatings are going to determine how much flare, purple fringe, not fringing, well, to some extent, but mostly we're looking for flare and ghosting when we talk about coatings. So I don't know how good those are, right? Because those are not reflected in tests like charts and things. You have to actually shoot with the lens to know. So when you look I think in terms of resolution and detail, that lens is going to do a good job. but you need to look at some reviews where people actually shoot with it and test for ghosting and flaring, and that will tell you what the coatings are like. And there's certainly going to be some. Well, the sharpness is pretty good. It's pretty good. I mean, the overall design looks pretty good, but the lack of the other type of glass is why the price is so low. Because the spherical glass typically reduces the size of the lens because it performs multiple functions. It performs a function of multiple lenses into a single lens because the lens is kind of, can be wavy. And so if I remember correctly, that lens, it's not that big actually. 10 ounces, 69 by 73. It's a pretty sizable lens. 300 grams. But it is an f1.4, right? So that would be my suggestion. If you're interested in that lens, when you see reviews, pay particular attention to ghosting and flaring. And purple fringing or chromatic aberration, coma. Those are also things that don't really show in the test quite as much. The fact that the Mtf chart jumps quite a bit from wide open, because they had two Mtf charts, 1.4 and one at f8. The fact that they had such a huge gap between the two in terms of performance really does show that there's no spherical glass, right? And that it probably will, wide open, have more aberrations, whether it's coma, chromatic, fringing, those kind of things, wide open. And those are things I can't get from any charts or anything. You have to have somebody test the lens and tell you, right? I suppose that one test I saw might talk about it. Nah, I already closed that window. Oh well. But I hope that helps. I don't know. I'm sorry to dive so long and talk about that lens for so long, but that's the problem when you have gas and you want to buy stuff. You just overanalyze things sometimes and want to look at every little thing. Now the chat has frozen. Are you serious? Oh, thank you, John. So I was down for 10 minutes. Okay. Uh, no movement. Can you guys see and hear me at least? Okay. Hopefully. I mean, I've been on for almost an hour. Maybe we should call it because this is just this is brutal. If I'm having all this technical difficulty. Um, okay, I'm fine now. Okay. All right. So hopefully you got my answer on that lens. And we were talking about cameras before I took that lens question and got distracted. It's not really distraction. I think it's useful for you guys to see me go through my entire process when I look at a lens and talk when I'm thinking about buying a lens. So that's how I treated that question, as if I were going to buy that lens. Since I don't have the lens, obviously I would need to buy it. Um, where do you go online to look for uh, different things, right? If you don't have a video online from a reviewer you trust, right, then what do you do online, right? So I always like to look for Mtf charts, imatest tests, right? Because imatest is an actual test of the lens, particularly if they're high-end glass. For high-end glass, you can trust that you'll get a good sample. There shouldn't be as much sample variation. For low-end glass like this Viltrox, even though the tester got good results in terms of sharpness and all that, you might get a copy that's not so great because the manufacturing tolerances aren't quite as stringent on low end glass. Other things you can look for when it comes to low end glass is when you look at the bokeh balls and things. Um, I didn't see. You might see onion rings in that lens. I didn't see any onion rings in some of the pictures that were online from that lens. You guys probably didn't see it because my thing went down. But when you see onion rings and things in the bokeh balls, that means it has a spherical glass in it, but they didn't polish it well. If you see onion rings that are just dirty, right, just speckly or just grainy, then that means they didn't polish the glass very well, right? Now, when you look at pro and high end glass and you look at the bokeh balls, you don't have onion rings and you don't have any grain or anything in the bokeh balls because they really have a very sophisticated polishing process for the lenses, and that's something a lot of reviewers mention in passing, but they don't explain why those things exist. So I thought I'd just let you know. In my research, I found out that yeah, onion rings and soap bubbles and all kinds of things like that are related to how they polish the glass. Then the coma, chromatic aberration, the fringing, uh, that that has a lot to do with the lens design itself, and then ghosting and flaring is a lot about the coatings, right? Uh, Now, I think 80% of the ghosting and flaring actually comes off the sensor in your camera because that has the biggest reflection inside the lens system apparently, and that causes a lot of the ghosting and flaring because think about it, the sensor has to take down the full image on a flat surface, and all that is reflected back through the lens, right? So the lens has to have coatings to kind of reduce that reflection. And then never mind the lens glass and everything inside itself. Every piece of glass is going to cause a slight reflection, but you have to add just enough coating to reduce it to where it's not visible, but not so much that it starts to affect the quality of light coming in. And but a lot of the coatings also control the fringing and things like that through uh, the light. But usually it's the optical design that controls the other things about how the light hits the sensor plane. And but anyhow, looks like a good lens for 300 bucks. I don't think you can lose. Oh, evaluating lens and camera process in 3 easy steps. Drop the lens and camera. Deep freeze the lens. And number 3, who knows, right? That's funny. Rick knows me well. If you guys have been following me a long time, you know I drop cameras all the time. I've been pretty good lately. I haven't. I did drop my OM1 already with the 300 f4 Pro on it. I don't know how. It was on the table, and I just got up to move some candles or something, and it just bam on the concrete. It still works fine, but still, uh, I think the lens took the brunt of the hit. I can't believe it. Anyway, and then I froze one of my lenses. It got filled with water in an ice storm, and overnight it froze. So the lens was full of ice, and I couldn't even zoom or do anything with it. And that was my 12 to 40 Pro, which still works. I let it dry out for a month, and amazingly, it still works, but it's not as sharp as it used to be. Probably because some of the lenses got out of alignment, but mainly probably because if you look inside the lens, you can see a lot of haze and stuff in there from the water and water drops. Um, okay. Rob Trex camera drop-in sessions. I know. Oh, hey Randy, how are you? Um, oh, so the OM1 is very durable because I've dropped it. So is the 300 F4 Pro. I mean, I dropped it on the concrete from about a height of 1 meter. It just went bam. Oh, I just, luckily I have insurance though. So if something did happen, I could have got it fixed. But as you know, these things are in short supply now. So if it actually broke, that camera would be out of commission for a long time, I'm sure. Just because of the way things are now. I was doing some testing yesterday with um yeah, it is a miracle that 12 to 40 Pro works at all, right? It's amazing. Like I said, it got full of water, then it froze, so it was full of ice, and then it's really amazing. I want to replace it, but I don't use it that much. But when I do use it, I want it to be sharp and clear and nice, because that's why you get a pro lens, right? So I almost feel like um, I might as well use a kit lens than use that lens because it's just not that sharp anymore. And I can see it. I can see it when I take pictures with it now. It just doesn't have that same bite that it used to. Uh, yeah, wrap lens. That might not be a bad idea. They probably don't make any wraps for the OM1 yet. Although I think what's his small rig does have a cage for it now. Um, that might not be a bad idea. Just get a cage for it, even though I'm not going to use it for what it's supposed to be, other than to protect the camera. But yeah, I was doing some testing yesterday uh, for depth of field and aperture because I'm trying to come up with another video on apertures and lenses, right? Lens design, also some more lectures on exposure, flash. Because I think I don't know. I really enjoy teaching and teaching live. I did a live class the other night, which went really well. Uh, and then of course doing the photo walks, right? So, but it just takes wow, it takes so much research, right? And then even then, I still get things wrong, and people call me out on it, which is fine. I don't mind being called out and corrected because I need to be, right? Uh, but still, those things take some time because I looked at my stats last month, and it's like I only put out 2 videos. The rest were just live streams, and some of the live streams were like lectures, right? I did one on exposure, one on composition, but most of it was just jibber jabber like this. And wow, it was rough. It's a rough month. It's going to be lean this month for Uncle Rob, let me tell you. uh, that's interesting. No, I haven't. I haven't contacted them. Um, Training wheels for my camera. Phew, God, I'm gonna get a crick in my neck. I wish this monitor. I gotta figure out why this thing stopped working. Because I use this a lot for my teaching, right? Because it's a drawing tablet, right? So I got this pen, and I can draw on it and stuff while I'm lecturing, like a real professor. But it's not working. Oh, but okay. I think everyone. I'll call it here. Um, I with all the technical difficulties I was having earlier, I think a lot of people dropped off anyway. I'm not sure how many people are here. I don't really have anything super major planned. It's my nephew's graduation, so I'm going to go to that this weekend. And I'm going to try and do, I'm going to try, I don't know. I can probably squeeze out a photo walk or something, video wise instead of a stream. But it's going to take me some time to put together the other videos I'm thinking about. Because what started me on this list here of everything that I have is, I wanted to see what I had available that I could test and compare to give real life examples of some of the things I wanted to demo during the lecture. And then I got distracted and said, geez, how much crap do I have, Because a common question, right? Think about this, right? There's a 20 millimeter f1.4 and there's a 25 millimeter f1.8, and there's also the 25 millimeter f1.2. So the question is, and there's let's look at the primes, right? So there's a 20, there's a 17, a 20, a 25. Those are really close. Is the 20 millimeter f1.4 going to give me a shallower depth of field than a 25 millimeter f1.8? Right? That's the question. And short answer is yeah, it will. The long answer is long, right? But basically, with a 25 millimeter, you have to back up a little bit, right? Because to get the same framing, you have to back up a little bit because it's a tighter lens. But it is a tighter focal length, so that by definition should give you better bokeh. But because the aperture is wider, there's a lot of math. So I pulled out all my lenses to try and figure out how can I demonstrate this concept of depth of field with different focal lengths, different apertures, and compare lenses. Because one of the buying decisions sometimes people make is they want that shallow depth of field. But 20 millimeters is pretty wide. Is it really going to give me a better, shallower depth of field than a 25 1.8, right? That I can buy for half the price? Is it going to be a sharper lens? Maybe, maybe not. But and then there's also the field of view, right? Because some people say, and this is why the Nifty 50 is so popular, is they like to have the image circle of the lens or angle of view of the lens to match the diagonal of the sensor. And the 20 millimeter lens is closer to the diameter of our micro four thirds sensors. So in theory, it should give you a more natural look or more natural view, angle of view, than the 25 millimeter. But we're talking about a 1 or 2 millimeter difference on the sensor, right? We're not talking about a huge difference in angle of view or in perspective. So either one will be fine. There's so many things. You can just, oh my God, you can just go crazy. At least I will. My brain is just mush from looking at all these different things because everybody has a different kind of question. And to be able to competently answer a question like that, is a 20 millimeter f1.4 going to give me a shallower depth of field than 25 f1.8? That's splitting hairs, but I think that's a legitimate question, right? Because I was thinking, do I replace my 17 and 25 and just get the 20? Right? Because I could sell those two lenses and pay for half the 20 millimeters. And ultimately, I decided not to. I'd rather have a 17 and a 25. But if you don't have any lenses now and you want a normal lens, do you get the 20 or 25, or do you get the 17? And in micro four thirds, the 20 millimeter is probably the most normal size because of that relationship of the diameter of the sensor versus the angle of view that the lens is providing at 20 millimeters. Because the diagonal of a micro four thirds sensor is 21.4, I think, right? So a 20 millimeter lens is closer to that than the 25 is, just by a little bit. And so I'd say probably if you don't have a 17 or a 25, the 20 millimeter f1.4 seems like a good buy, because it's probably at least as sharp as those two lenses, as the other two primes. It's a pro lens, so it's weather sealed, and it's the most normal angle of view. So it's the equivalent to a nifty 50 in terms of angle of view. Even the nifty 50 on a full frame isn't quite the right angle of view. The 40 is actually closer, even on full frame. But anyhow, that'll be my last tip. Is probably a 20 millimeter, because Panasonic makes a 20 millimeter f1.7 pancake lens, and if you don't mind the slow autofocusing, that might be a good way to go too, because it's cheap, it's fast, and it's compact. But you can't go wrong, really. 17, 20, 25, any of those lenses will be fine. But anyhow, anyway, let me thank everybody for coming in. I didn't see any other questions here. Oh, shot at a graduation last week and pretended everybody had. That's funny. Oh, Jack has a question. Jane Mack has a question. Can you use the 12 to 100 f4 Pro for night photography? Yeah. You just have to crank your ISO up, because f4 is a little bit slow for night photography. And by night photography, I mean, I'm assuming it's like street photography type stuff. If you're talking about astrophotography, it's possible you could use that lens, because with astrophotography, you're on a tripod and you can set the exposures as long as you want. So the f4 is not as big a deal. But for handheld, walking around type taking pictures at night, f4 is a little slow, so your ISO is going to be higher. So get ready for like 1600, 3200, 6400 ISOs to keep your shutter speed up. Now, the good thing is that lens has in lens stabilization, and it syncs with, I think, some, if not all, but it syncs with most cameras with the in-body stabilization. So you can use slower shutter speeds than you otherwise normally could with any other lens, because that has the lens stabilization. So I wouldn't hesitate, to, even at 100 millimeters, you could probably get away with 1/20th of a second on that lens at night, in which case your ISOs will be probably around 800, which is not bad at all for night shooting. But like I said, f4 is the problem with that lens. It's going to force you to use higher ISOs regardless, because you can only, Alexa is just constantly, uh, you can only go so slow on the shutter speed before you start making creative decisions, right? People moving in the background, cars, whatever that might be. So preferably, if I had a choice, I would just use like a 25 millimeter prime or a 20 millimeter f1.4. That would be my choice for night photography. Or if money no object, the 25 millimeter f1.2, right? You gotta let as much light in as possible in night photography to keep your ISOs down low. Um, f4 is doable, but it's tough. Wow, $1,000, yeah, that's a lot. I thought it was like 600 or 700. Yeah, I'm not getting that. That's too much. Money no object, I'd probably get it, but money's an object, right? Yeah, I saw that. The 9 millimeter f1.7. That looks like a really good lens. It's for micro four thirds. Um, okay. I don't see any more question. Hopefully I answered that for Jane. All right. Um, Andrew, I went with the 17, but I already have the 14. Oh, the Marked Wolf wants the 17, but you already have the 14 and 25. Yeah, then I probably wouldn't get a 17. But okay, I'm definitely going to go this time. So you guys have, what is today? Today's Thursday. So have a great weekend. I might be back Sunday, probably not. I probably won't do a stream this Sunday, but look, check my channel, see if you see a thumbnail or not. Um, and like I said, it'll probably be another week or so before I can actually crank out a real video. So sorry about that, but I want it to be good if I'm going to make one. Other than the photo walks, those are kind of random. But you guys have a good weekend either way. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you again soon.